She threw a glass of juice at the maid's face just because it wasn't cold enough. She screamed insults at her driver in front of the entire school. And when her parents begged her to stop, she laughed in their faces. This is the story of Charity Thompson, the girl who had everything and respected nothing. What happened next changed her life forever. If you love powerful real-life stories like this, stories filled with drama, life lessons, and shocking twists, take a moment right now to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about Charity so far. Do you believe people like her can really change? Charity Thompson grew up in a world most people only dream about. Her family lived in a massive estate in Connecticut, the kind with gates, fountains, and a staff of 12. Her father was a successful investment banker. Her mother chaired multiple charity boards and was known throughout their community as a woman of grace and dignity. They had built their reputation on hard work, integrity, and giving back. But their daughter? She was destroying everything they stood for, one terrible decision at a time. This is not a story about a girl who made a few mistakes. This is about someone who became a monster because no one ever told her no. And this is about the desperate choice her parents made to save her before it was too late. Charity was 14 when the whispers started getting louder. People in their church would glance at her parents with pity. Teachers at her expensive private school would sigh when they saw her name on the class list. The family's reputation was crumbling, and it was all because of one person. From the moment Charity could talk, she learned that tears got her anything she wanted. A tantrum in a toy store meant a new doll. Screaming at dinner meant a different meal. By the time she was 10, she had her parents trained like dogs. They were busy people, important people, and it was easier to give in than to fight. That was their first mistake. But they didn't just give in on small things. They gave in on everything. Charity never made her bed. Not once. She would leave her bedroom looking like a disaster zone, clothes thrown everywhere, makeup spilled on the carpet, food rotting on plates under her bed. When her mother gently suggested she clean up, Charity would explode. She would scream that they had maids for that. She would slam doors. She would refuse to eat. And her parents, exhausted and embarrassed, would back down. The maids would clean it. They always did. But it wasn't just laziness. It was cruelty. Charity didn't just ignore the staff. She tormented them. There was Rosa, a sweet woman from Guatemala who had worked for the family for 8 years. Rosa cleaned Charity's bathroom every single day, scrubbing toilets and wiping mirrors. One morning, Charity walked in while Rosa was working. She looked at the mirror, squinted, and said it had streaks. Rosa apologized and started wiping it again. Charity grabbed the cleaning spray from her hands and sprayed it directly in Rosa's face. Then she laughed. She actually laughed as Rosa stumbled backward, coughing and wiping her eyes. When Rosa reported it to Mrs. Thompson, Charity denied it. She said Rosa was lying. And for weeks, her parents wanted to believe her. Then there was Michael, the family driver. He was a former Marine, a quiet man who took his job seriously. He drove Charity to school every morning, and every morning she made his life hell. She would blast music on her phone and ignore him when he spoke. She would put her feet up on the seats, leaving dirt and scuff marks. One day, Michael politely asked her to wear her seatbelt. Charity stared at him in the rearview mirror and said, "You work for me. Don't ever tell me what to do again." Michael said nothing. But when they pulled up to the school, Charity got out, turned to face the car, and shouted loud enough for other students to hear, "My driver smells like cheap cologne and it makes me sick." Other kids laughed. Michael sat there, gripping the steering wheel, humiliated. At school, Charity was worse. She treated her teachers like servants. In English class, Mrs. Patterson asked her to read a paragraph out loud. Charity was scrolling on her phone. When Mrs. Patterson repeated the request, Charity looked up and said, "I'm busy." The class went silent. Mrs. Patterson, a veteran teacher with 26 years of experience, felt her face go red. She asked Charity to put the phone away. Charity rolled her eyes and said, "Make me." Mrs. Patterson sent her to the principal's office. Charity went, but not before muttering something cruel under her breath that made 2 girls gasp. The principal called her parents. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson apologized profusely. They promised it wouldn't happen again. But it did. It always did. Because when they got home and tried to discipline her, Charity would explode into hysterics. She would scream that they didn't love her. She would say they cared more about their image than her happiness. And her parents, scared of pushing her away, would soften. They would negotiate. They would let it slide. But the community was watching. At church, people noticed that Charity never sang during worship. She sat in the back row on her phone, sometimes with earbuds in. One Sunday, the youth pastor approached her and kindly asked if she wanted to join the teen group. Charity looked him up and down and said, "I'd rather die." An older woman sitting nearby heard it. By Monday, the story had spread. Mrs. Thompson started receiving fewer invitations to events. People stopped calling. Their friends were distancing themselves, not because they were cruel, but because being around the Thompsons meant being around Charity. And nobody wanted that. Her parents were heartbroken. They had worked so hard to build a life of meaning and respect. And their only daughter was tearing it apart. They tried therapy. Charity refused to talk. They tried taking away privileges. She broke things in response. They tried family meetings, written contracts, rewards for good behavior. Nothing worked. Charity had learned that if she pushed hard enough, her parents would break. And she was right. Until the day she went too far. It happened at the annual school fundraiser. The Thompsons were major donors. Mrs. Thompson was even on the planning committee. The event was held at a beautiful hotel ballroom, with hundreds of guests, including the mayor, local business owners, and school board members. Charity was required to attend. She showed up in an outfit her mother had begged her not to wear, too short and completely inappropriate. But that wasn't the worst part. During the speeches, while the headmaster was talking about the importance of education and character, Charity's phone rang. Loud. She didn't silence it. She answered it. In the middle of the ballroom. And she started talking. People turned to stare. Her mother's face went white. Her father stood up and walked over, whispering urgently for her to hang up. Charity ignored him. When he reached for the phone, she yanked it away and said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, "Get off me. You're embarrassing." Then she stood up and walked out. The room was silent. Mrs. Thompson started crying. Mr. Thompson followed Charity outside, shaking with rage and shame. That night, they made a decision. It was the hardest decision they had ever made. But they realized that loving Charity meant stopping her before she destroyed herself. They couldn't fix her. But maybe someone else could. 2 weeks later, Charity was on a plane. She didn't know where she was going until they arrived. Her parents had told her it was a family trip. When the car pulled up to the iron gates of Ashford Hall Boarding School in rural Massachusetts, Charity's stomach dropped. The building looked like something out of an old movie, tall stone walls, narrow windows, surrounded by endless fields and forests. There was nothing around for miles. No mall. No coffee shops. No escape. Her father carried her suitcase to the front entrance. Her mother held her hand, tears streaming down her face. Charity realized what was happening and started to panic. She begged. She promised to change. She swore she would be good. But her parents had heard it all before. Her father kissed her forehead and said, "We love you too much to let you keep living like this." Then they left. Charity stood in the grand entryway, surrounded by dark wood and old portraits, feeling more alone than she ever had in her life. A tall woman appeared at the top of the staircase. She was maybe 50, with silver hair pulled back tight, sharp eyes, and a posture that radiated authority. She walked down slowly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. When she reached Charity, she didn't smile. She didn't offer comfort. She simply said, "My name is Mrs. Brennan. I am the head of house. You will address me as ma'am. You will follow every rule. You will complete every task. And you will learn what discipline means. Do you understand?" Charity opened her mouth to say something sarcastic, but the look in Mrs. Brennan's eyes stopped her cold. She nodded. Mrs. Brennan handed her a thick booklet. "These are the school rules. You have until tomorrow morning to memorize the first 10 pages. You will be tested. If you fail, you will spend your first Saturday scrubbing the dining hall floor. Alone. Charity stared at the booklet in disbelief. Mrs. Brennan continued. Your room is on the 3rd floor. No phones. No laptops. No personal electronics. You will wake at 6. Breakfast is at 6:30. Classes begin at 7:15. Lights out at 9. You are not special here. You are not rich here. You are a student, and you will be treated like everyone else. Follow me. Charity followed her up 3 flights of stairs, her suitcase feeling heavier with every step. Her room was tiny. A single bed, a wooden desk, a small closet, and a window overlooking the empty fields. No TV. No decorations. It looked like a prison cell. Mrs. Brennan set the suitcase down and said, unpack. Dinner is in 1 hour. If you're late, you don't eat. Then she left, locking the door from the outside. Charity collapsed on the bed and cried. Not because she was sorry, but because she was furious. How dare they send her here? How dare they lock her in this horrible place? She pulled out her phone to call her parents and scream at them, but there was no service. She tried the window. It didn't open. She was trapped. That first night at dinner, Charity learned just how different this place was. The dining hall was filled with about 60 girls, all dressed in identical uniforms, plain navy skirts and white blouses. They sat in silence, waiting. When Mrs. Brennan entered, everyone stood. Charity stayed seated. Every head turned toward her. Mrs. Brennan walked over slowly and said, stand. Charity crossed her arms. Make me. The room gasped. Mrs. Brennan's expression didn't change. She simply said, you've just earned dish duty for the next week. Now stand or make it 2 weeks. Charity stood, shaking with rage. After dinner, Charity was escorted to the kitchen. She was handed rubber gloves, an apron, and shown a massive pile of dishes. She laughed bitterly and said, you can't be serious. The kitchen supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Cardoso, pointed to the sink and said, you have 2 hours. If you're not done, you stay until you are. Charity refused. She sat on the floor. Ms. Cardoso shrugged and said, fine. I'll wait. An hour passed. Charity got hungry. She got tired. She got bored. Finally, she stood up and started washing. Her hands cramped. Her back ached. She cried. But no one came to help her. When she finally finished, it was past 11. She stumbled back to her room, exhausted and humiliated. The next morning, she woke to a loud bell at 6. She groaned and rolled over. 5 minutes later, her door opened. Mrs. Brennan stood there with a bucket of ice water. She didn't say a word. She just poured it on the bed. Charity screamed and jumped up, soaking wet and freezing. Mrs. Brennan said, you have 10 minutes to be dressed and downstairs. If you're late, you run laps. Then she left. Charity wanted to scream. She wanted to break something. But she got dressed. The days blurred together. Wake up early. Make your bed with hospital corners or do it again. Attend classes where teachers didn't care about excuses. Eat meals in silence. Complete chores. Study. Sleep. Repeat. Charity tried to rebel. She talked back. She refused tasks. She broke small rules. And every time, there was a consequence. Extra chores. Loss of privileges. Public corrections. The other girls watched her with a mix of pity and annoyance. They had all been through it. They knew resistance was pointless. One girl, a quiet brunette named Sophie, tried to help. She showed Charity how to fold her clothes properly so they'd pass inspection. Charity snapped at her, I don't need your help. Sophie shrugged and walked away. That night, Charity failed inspection. She had to refold everything while Mrs. Brennan watched. It took an hour. Her hands shook with frustration. Weeks passed. Charity stopped talking back as much. Not because she respected the rules, but because she was tired. Exhausted. Completely worn down. She missed her phone. She missed her soft bed. She missed being able to do whatever she wanted. But none of that mattered here. Here, she was nobody. And slowly, painfully, That realization started to crack something inside her. 3 months in, Charity had her first real breakdown. It was a Saturday morning, and she was assigned to help in the school garden. It was freezing outside, her hands were covered in dirt, and she was planting bulbs in the cold ground alongside 5 other girls. She hated every second. At one point, she threw down her trowel and said, "This is ridiculous. I shouldn't have to do this." One of the other girls, a senior named Anika, looked at her calmly and said, "None of us should have to." "But we do. That's the point." Charity glared at her. "What point?" "To torture us." Anika smiled sadly. "To teach us that the world doesn't revolve around us." That night, Charity lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. She thought about Rosa, about the spray bottle, about Michael, about Mrs. Patterson. For the first time, she let herself remember the look on their faces, the hurt, the humiliation. And for the first time, she felt something other than anger. She felt shame. It was small, just a flicker, but it was there. And it terrified her. Mrs. Brennan noticed the change. She always noticed. One evening, she called Charity into her office. Charity sat down, nervous. Mrs. Brennan didn't yell. She didn't lecture. She just asked, "Do you know why you're here?" Charity shrugged. "Because my parents hate me." Mrs. Brennan shook her head. "No, you're here because they love you. And they were brave enough to admit they couldn't help you alone." Charity's throat tightened. Mrs. Brennan continued. "You've spent your whole life believing you were special. That rules didn't apply to you. That other people existed to serve you. But you're not special, Charity. You're just a girl. A girl who was never taught how to be kind, how to work, how to respect others. That's not your fault. But what you do now, that is." Charity didn't respond. She couldn't. Because deep down, she knew Mrs. Brennan was right. The turning point came in the spring. Charity had been at Ashford Hall for nearly 6 months. She still wasn't perfect. She still messed up. But she was trying. One afternoon, a new girl arrived. Her name was Emily, and she was a mess. She cried constantly. She refused to follow rules. She screamed at the staff. Charity watched her and saw herself. It was like looking in a mirror. And it made her sick. One night, Emily was sobbing in the hallway. Charity walked past, hesitated, then turned back. She sat down next to her. Emily looked up, surprised. Charity said, "I know you hate it here. I did too. I still do sometimes. But it gets easier. Not because the rules change, but because you do." Emily wiped her eyes. "I don't want to change." Charity nodded. "Yeah, I didn't either. But the person I was before, she was horrible. And I didn't even realize it." Emily stared at her. "What if I can't change?" Charity thought for a moment. "Then you stay miserable. Your choice." From that moment, something shifted. Charity started helping other students. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She showed the younger girls how to pass inspection. She volunteered for extra kitchen duty. She stopped complaining. She started listening. And slowly, people stopped avoiding her. They started trusting her. Mrs. Brennan watched all of this quietly. One day, she pulled Charity aside and said, "I'm proud of you." Charity's eyes filled with tears. It was the first time in her life she felt proud of herself too. But growth isn't linear. A few weeks later, Charity got a letter from home. Her parents were coming to visit. She panicked. She didn't know what to say to them. She was still angry. But she was also different now. She didn't know how to explain that. When the day came, she sat across from them in the visitation room. Her mother looked older. Her father looked tired. There was a long silence. Then her mother said, "How are you?" Charity's voice cracked. "I'm sorry." Her mother started crying. Her father reached across the table and held her hand. "We know," he said. "We're sorry too." They talked for hours. Charity told them about the rules, the chores, the punishments. But she also told them about the garden, about helping Emily, about learning to make her bed, about feeling, for the first time, like she was becoming someone she didn't hate. Her parents listened. And when they left, her mother hugged her tight and whispered, We're so glad we didn't give up on you." By the end of her first year at Ashford Hall, Charity was unrecognizable. She woke up before the bell. She kept her room spotless. She helped younger students without being asked. She participated in classes. She even joined the choir, something she never would have considered before. But the biggest change wasn't visible. It was internal. She had learned to think before she spoke, to consider how her actions affected others, to understand that respect was earned, not owed. One of her teachers, Mr. Coulson, noticed her progress. He taught history and had a reputation for being tough but fair. One day after class, he asked her to stay behind. Charity's heart sank. She thought she was in trouble. But Mr. Coulson smiled and said, "I wanted to tell you that you're doing excellent work. Not just academically, but as a person." Charity didn't know what to say. Mr. Coulson continued, "I read your file when you first arrived. I'll be honest, I didn't think you'd make it past the first month. But you proved me wrong. That takes strength." Charity's eyes watered. "I didn't have a choice." Mr. Coulson shook his head. "You always have a choice. You chose to fight us. Then you chose to fight yourself. And now you're choosing to grow. That's courage." That summer, Charity stayed at the school. Most students went home, but she wasn't ready. She spent the quiet months reading, gardening, and reflecting. She wrote letters to Rosa and Michael, apologies she didn't know if she'd ever send. She wrote in a journal every night, processing everything she'd been through. And she started thinking about who she wanted to be when she left this place. Sophomore year was different. Charity was no longer the angry new girl. She was a mentor. Underclassmen looked up to her. She was assigned to help orient new students, the same ones who arrived kicking and screaming like she had. She was patient with them. She understood their anger because she felt it. And she knew that beneath the rage was fear. Fear of change. Fear of losing control. Fear of facing who they really were. There was one girl, Jessica, who reminded Charity so much of herself it hurt. Jessica was rich, spoiled, and mean. She insulted everyone. She refused to work. She mocked the rules. Charity was assigned as her peer mentor. At first, Jessica wanted nothing to do with her. But Charity was persistent. She didn't lecture. She didn't judge. She just showed up, day after day. And slowly, Jessica started to soften. One night, Jessica asked, "Why do you even care?" Charity thought about it. "Because someone cared about me when I didn't deserve it. And it saved my life." By the end of her second year, Charity had become one of the most respected students at Ashford Hall. She was given leadership roles. She mediated conflicts. She represented the school at events. And when her parents visited, they barely recognized her. She stood tall. She spoke thoughtfully. She smiled genuinely. Her mother cried every single visit, but they were tears of joy. Junior year brought new challenges. Charity was taking advanced classes and preparing for college. She was also given the responsibility of training new peer mentors. She loved it. She realized she was good at helping people, good at listening, good at guiding without controlling. Mrs. Brennan pulled her aside one day and said, "Have you thought about what you want to do after you graduate?" Charity nodded. "I want to work with kids. Maybe troubled kids. I want to help them the way this place helped me." Mrs. Brennan smiled, something she rarely did. "You'll be excellent at it." But Charity's biggest test came during spring break of junior year. She was allowed to go home for the first time in over 2 years. She was terrified. Terrified of slipping back into old habits. Terrified of disappointing her parents. Terrified of seeing Rosa and Michael and not knowing what to say. But she went. And the moment she walked into her old house, she felt like a stranger. Everything looked the same, but she was completely different. Rosa was in the kitchen. When she saw Charity, she froze. Charity walked over slowly and said, "I need to tell you something. What I did to you is cruel. It was wrong. And I'm so sorry." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. She pulled Charity into a hug and said, "I forgive you, Mija. I forgive you." Charity sobbed. She found Michael next. He was washing the car. She apologized to him too. He listened quietly, then nodded and said, "Takes guts to admit when you're wrong." I respect that. That week at home was healing. Charity helped around the house. She went to church with her parents. She had dinner with old family friends who were shocked by the change in her. And when it was time to go back to Ashford Hall, she wasn't sad. She was grateful. Grateful for the structure. Grateful for the discipline. Grateful for the second chance. Senior year was bittersweet. Charity had grown to love Ashford Hall. It had been her prison, her hell, and her salvation all at once. She threw herself into her final year. She maintained perfect grades. She led the peer mentor program. She even gave a speech at the school's annual parent event, sharing her story and thanking the faculty for not giving up on her. Her parents sat in the front row, crying and clapping. Mrs. Brennan watched from the back, arms crossed, a rare look of pride on her face. Charity applied to colleges and got accepted to several. She chose a school with a strong social work program. She wanted to dedicate her life to helping kids who had been lost like she was. When graduation day came, Charity stood on stage in her cap and gown, looking out at her parents, her teachers, and the girls she had mentored. Mrs. Brennan presented her with a special award for leadership and character growth. As she handed Charity the plaque, she whispered, "You did it. I knew you would." After graduation, Charity didn't forget where she came from. She stayed in touch with Mrs. Brennan. She visited Ashford Hall every year to speak to new students. She told them her story, the ugly truth of who she had been and the hard journey of who she became. She didn't sugarcoat it. She didn't pretend it was easy. But she showed them that change was possible. That discipline wasn't punishment. It was direction. And that sometimes, the people who love you most are the ones who refuse to let you destroy yourself. Years later, Charity became a counselor at a residential program for at-risk youth. She worked with kids who had been written off by everyone else. Kids who were angry, broken, and lost. And she understood them. Because she had been them. She knew what it felt like to be so full of rage that you hurt everyone around you. She knew what it took to break through that and find something real underneath. And she was good at her job. Really good. Because she had lived it. One day, she got a call from Mrs. Brennan. Ashford Hall wanted to honor her. They were creating an alumni speaker series, and they wanted Charity to be the first. She accepted. When she returned to the campus, now in her mid-20s, she felt a wave of emotion. She walked the same halls, saw the same strict rules posted on the walls, heard the same bells. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She was grateful. She stood in front of a room full of current students, many of them new and angry, just like she had been. She looked at their defiant faces and smiled. Then she began. "My name is Charity Thompson. And when I first came here, I was the worst person you could imagine. I was cruel. I was selfish. I was broken. I hated this place. I hated the rules. I hated all of you. But this place saved my life. Not by being easy. Not by letting me do whatever I wanted. But by holding me accountable. By refusing to give up on me. Even when I gave up on myself." The room was silent. She continued. "I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be hard. You're going to cry. You're going to be angry. You're going to want to quit. But if you let it, this place will show you who you really are. Not the person your parents see. Not the person your friends think you are. But the person you're capable of becoming. And that person is worth fighting for." When she finished, several students had tears in their eyes. One girl raised her hand and asked, "Do you ever miss the old you?" Charity thought for a moment. "No, because the old me was miserable. I just didn't know it yet. I thought being cruel made me powerful. But it just made me empty. The person I am now? She's not perfect. But she's real. And she's kind. And she actually likes herself. That's worth more than anything." After the talk, Mrs. Brennan walked her to the front gate. They stood there for a moment in comfortable silence. Then Mrs. Brennan said, "You were one of the hardest cases I ever had. But also one of the most rewarding." Charity smiled. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Mrs. Brennan nodded. "Thank your parents. They made the hardest choice a parent can make. They loved you enough to let you go." Charity drove away from Ashford Hall that day with a full heart. She thought about her journey. About the girl who threw juice in a maid's face. About the girl who humiliated her driver. About the girl who answered her phone in the middle of a speech. That girl was gone. And in her place was someone stronger. Someone kinder. Someone who understood that true strength wasn't about control. It was about humility. It was about growth. It was about choosing every single day to be better than you were yesterday. Her parents had been right. Sending her away had been the hardest thing they ever did. But it was also the most loving. Because sometimes, saving someone means breaking them first. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to rebuild themselves from the ground up. Charity had been given that chance. And she didn't waste it. Today, she works with dozens of kids every year. Kids who remind her of herself. And every time she sees one of them start to change, start to soften, start to realize that they're not beyond saving, she thinks of Mrs. Brennan, of Ashford Hall, of her parents. And she's grateful. Because discipline didn't destroy her. It saved her. And now she gets to pass that gift on. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it.